Are you one of those boxers or kickboxers that knows that you should be doing more shadowboxing but just aren't? Over the years of training and teaching and instructing and coaching, what I find is that most people who box or kickbox are not doing enough shadowboxing. So today, I'm gonna give you guys some benefits of shadowboxing and break down how I think you should be approaching shadowboxing, and hopefully this will increase the amount of shadowboxing that you are doing and that's in your training regimen. First of all, let's go over some of the benefits. The obvious benefits: great for your cardio, great for training yourself how to flow from punches to kicks to punches, offense, defense, how to put it all together. All of the obvious reasons that we know shadowboxing is good, but I think that there are some other reasons that are not talked about that much, and those are the ones that I want to focus on. So, the biggest benefit that I have noticed about shadowboxing that no one talks about is that it trains you to miss. Sounds kind of ridiculous, but when you think about it, at the highest level, boxers, kickboxers, professionals, amateurs, no matter who's doing it, most of your punches are missing. The top rated boxers and kickboxers are only landing about 40%. So at the highest level of boxing and kickboxing, most punches are missing. So you have to train for the inevitable reality. How do you do that? You shadow box. With shadow boxing, you don't have that heavy object guaranteed to be in front of you every time you throw a punch or a kick. So you're forced to be able to carry your own weight. You're forced to be able to maintain your balance as you flow from kick to punch to punch to punch, and from technique to technique, combination to combination. You train yourself to be able to miss. When we're working on the heavy bag or we're doing mitt work, those targets are there guaranteed to catch us and catch our weight when we throw them. So if that's the only kind of training that we do, we never get an opportunity to miss. And if most of our punches are missing, when do we ever get a chance to work that? Shadowboxing is the answer. When you shadowbox, you don't have something holding your weight up. So you're forced to throw a punch and it not hit anything and still be able to maintain your balance, to recover, to bring that hand back to cover, to maintain your stance, and to go from one punch to the other punch. When we have that bag in front of us, that bag is also carrying a lot of the load, a lot of the energy that we are expending. So for example, when I'm throwing a punch, I'm throwing energy toward the target. So a lot of that energy is getting transferred over to the target when I'm hitting the heavy bag or when I'm hitting mitts. But in shadowboxing, I have to figure out how to absorb that energy, how to make it so that energy doesn't throw my balance off, how that energy doesn't throw my recovery off. That means bringing my hands back to cover up again. So shadowboxing, when you're shadowboxing, you are increasing your level of control that you have over your balance, over your stance, over your footing, your footwork. And that, I believe, is the biggest benefit from shadowboxing. Yes, you do get to train your different techniques. You do get to see how things flow together. You improve your improvisational skills, going from punches to combinations to kicks without having to think about it. And shadowboxing helps you flow with all of those things. But the biggest benefit that I have noticed with shadowboxing that nobody talks about is that it trains you for the inevitable misses that you're going to come across in sparring and in fighting in general. So let's talk about exactly how we should be approaching shadowboxing in order to get the most out of it. First of all, let's start with our footing and our footwork. You rarely get an opportunity, whether it's in sparring, whether you're working on the bag, or even when somebody's holding mitts for you, you rarely get an opportunity to really work your footwork. So shadowboxing is the perfect time to exaggerate the amount of movement that you're doing in order to get the most benefit footwork-wise out of shadowboxing. What I always recommend to my students is treat the mat like it's hot lava. You don't want to have your feet on the mat for too long. Move, and move. And when you do that, you get to work on the intricacies of your footwork. Moving an inch forward, moving an inch back, moving 3 inches to the left, moving 3 inches to the right, throwing your punches. All of that stuff gets, if you do it correctly, gets worked to the most if you do it correctly. So the first thing that we want to be doing when we're shadowboxing is moving and moving often. I tell people all the time, what we're trying to do, and shadowboxing is the perfect way to train this and make this habit for ourselves, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to take two opposite concepts, which is stability and mobility. And we're trying to merge those two together and interwork those two things. And that takes a little bit of training with the timing, and shadowboxing is the perfect opportunity to really drive the timing of it all home for yourself. So for example, when I'm moving, if I'm working on my mobility, I'm working on my intricacies of my footwork, I'm moving to the left, moving to the right, I'm quarter turning, I'm pivoting, I'm doing all of the things that I want to do, that I need to be doing with shadowboxing. For the split second that I'm throwing a punch or I'm throwing a kick, I need maximum stability. And to go from agile and moving and mobile to stable, concrete, that takes some timing, that takes development, and shadowboxing is the perfect opportunity to work those things. So you want to move often when you're shadowboxing. The second thing that you want to be doing is you want to take small steps. I tell my students all the time, a boxing match, a kickboxing match is a game of inches. The difference between being in range and out of range is inches. The difference between a solid angle and being in front of your opponent is inches. There's no need to be taking these huge steps while you're shadowboxing, because it's not going to do you any good. You want to be able to move out of range slightly and get back in range so you can throw your offense at your opponent. And you do that, first of all, by shadowboxing, but while you're shadowboxing, you do that by making your steps smaller. The second thing that you want to do is you want to work within a very small circle. The smaller, the better. You don't want to be dashing across the mats and starting your shadowboxing session on this end of the mat, and then 30 seconds later, you're all the way down on the other end of the mat. Draw out, or you can imagine a small circle and stay within that circle. So you're in that circle and you're moving at a maximum level. You're taking small steps. You end up being able to manipulate a small piece of real estate, making yourself a nightmare for anybody that's standing in front of you. The next thing that you want to do is you want to be throwing your punches, and this is specifically for your punches, at full range of motion or full extension. The biggest mistake that I see when people are shadowboxing, because they don't have someone holding mitts, or they don't have that heavy bag in front of them, is they start throwing these little short punches. Whatever you train is what you're going to be doing when you have somebody in front of you. And you don't want to make the habit of, because you're not hitting a target, you pull your punches short. You throw those punches out in full extension. And again, it goes back to that point of training to miss. Not that we train to miss intentionally, we train so we're ready to miss. And you do that by fully extending your punches. Throw those punches out. Throw those punches out as hard as you possibly can. Again, training to miss. If you throw a punch out there with the intention of actually hitting your opponent and they move out the way or they block the punch, you don't want to be thrown off. And the best way to make sure that that doesn't happen is in shadowboxing. And while you're in shadowboxing, you throw those punches out fully extended, full range of motion. And that will give you the awareness and just the experience of missing, so that when it happens inevitably, when you have somebody in front of you, you're not thrown off. So to recap, we know that shadowboxing is great for your cardio. We know that it's great for helping you flow from combination to combination. It's great for working your footwork and all of those things. But the biggest thing that nobody mentions about shadowboxing, the biggest benefit is that it trains you to miss without missing a beat. It trains you to miss without that miss throwing you off. And in order to do that, you have to move around often. You have to take small steps. You have to work within a small area, a small circle, and you have to fully extend and throw your punches full range of motion. Hopefully that was something a little bit different, an angle that you've never heard before. Yes, shadowbox, but shadowbox, but these are some extra reasons why you need to shadowbox. And I know that you guys aren't shadowboxing as much as you should be. So hopefully this is the reasons that will take your shadowboxing to the next level. Till next time, Coach Suli, Reps and Sweat Martial Arts and Fitness. This was Mat Chat.